Hello everyone, and welcome to this mess. I'm only doing this because I had a problem of doors not wanting to stay put, and I couldn't find anyone on YouTube who was able to tell me how to fix it. I mean to fix it right. The experienced ones in the audience are going to hear me say things that they think are obvious. Well, there are people here who have never done this before, and they've never seen this before, so chill. This is for everyone. It seems like a long process, but that's just because you're going to make yourself a couple of tools. After this, you'll have the tools, and the next one you do will be a breeze. It's pretty reasonable to want your doors to stay the way you put them, but some doors are not reasonable. They want to open or shut as they please. The house that I live in is tipped a little. The doors on one side of the hallway want to swing open, and the doors on the other side of the hallway want to swing closed. Well, one solution might be to jack up one side of your house. Let's just pass right by that idea. There are other entries in this venue that say just bend the hinge pins, so the door works lousy, but it's stable. But that's a crap solution. Hey, I fixed the door. I whacked it with a hammer. I whacked it real good. No, this is a fixable situation. Let's start with a little understanding of what's happening. If the axis going through your top hinge pin and your bottom hinge pin is a straight line up and down, the door will be stable wherever you place it. Because why not? If you tip the axis, the door will swing in the direction that you are tipping the axis because you're presenting the door to gravity. You've heard of gravity, it's everywhere. So you want the axis through the hinges to be like this, straight up, straight down. There's a gauge for measuring this. It's called a plumb line. Merriam-Webster says plumb line, a line, as of chord, that is used especially to determine verticality. Verticality, I like that. So what you do is somehow hang a piece of string so that it goes straight down through the top hinge plate. The other end of the string is weighed down with something symmetrical and pointy, so it can point. See where the string points, adjust the position of the plates so that the string points down through the middle of the pinholes in both plates, and you have achieved verticality. Now, which hinge plate do you want to move? You want to move the one that needs to come outwards from its original position. Because if you move the one that wants to come inwards toward the jamb in the molding, you're going to have to cut the pocket larger, and the door is going to crash into the molding, and you're going to have to take the molding off and move it, which is conceptually easy but practically a giant pain, and you're going to break it, and they don't make that molding anymore, and you'll have to re-shellac the molding even if you don't replace it because of all the new puttied up holes that you made, and you have to find matching shellac somewhere, and just don't. Move whichever end has to come outward from its original position. Don't worry about the plates on the door. Leave them alone. Although, it certainly wouldn't hurt to check whether they're mounted more or less uniformly. There are commercial plumb bobs. If you look in eBay, there are some very pretty antique ones. But your target is going to be very close to the house's woodwork, and your plumb weight needs to be kind of skinny. You can contrive whatever you want to contrive, but if you want to do what I did, you're going to make your own. Now, don't hang up. I'm going to give you some options here. Stick with me. You'll like one of them. You might like all of them. What I did was to take a few inches of 5/16 inch hardwood dowel. And by the way, the ones at craft departments have a nicer finish than the ones at the lumber store. Drill a hole in one end and put the other end in a pencil sharpener. When you pick out your piece of dowel at the store, they won't all be straight. In fact, none of them will. Pick out the straightest one that they have. When you cut off a piece, roll it on something flat to make sure that it's straight. If it's not straight, cut another one. If you use a bent piece, all this work will be misguided. And you're going to have to drill a hole in the end of the dowel with which to attach the string. Just glue a piece of string into the hole.
Now wait a minute.
How are you going to drill an accurate hole in the center of a small dowel? My original version of this presentation went into a description of making a wooden cube with 2 coaxial holes in order to hold the dowel for the drill. This drawing tells you all you need to know to do this. The small hole goes all the way through and serves as a pilot hole for subsequent passes with increasing drill sizes. This drawing tells you all you need to know to do this. But you can't do this without a drill press because every pass with every drill has to be perfectly perpendicular to the cube's surface. And maybe you don't have a drill press. Maybe you don't want to have a drill press. I would recommend that you get one day. It makes your whole life better. But maybe that's just not where you're at. So let's redneck engineer a few options that won't cost very much. Screw eyes are described by standard numbers, and size number 204 is narrow, which you need, and relatively heavy, which you need. You'll have to make sure that the thread is at the top of the loop and it points straight down. It won't do that by itself. Hang it from a thread and tweak it into a spin. If the tip wiggles, it's not straight. Move the thread and spin it again. When the tip stays in the middle, you're good to go. How about hacking a big pen? You can't pull the cap off the back end because it's glued on. You have to cut off the end with the cap, break the crystal off the cap with pliers, drill a 1/16 inch hole through the middle of the cap, the middle of the cap, the middle of the cap, stick your thread in and put a drop of glue in there, and then glue the cap back on. You'll have to cut off some of the ink tube because the pen is shorter, and save the piece because you're going to need it later. How about a sleek, glamorous piece of brass, and you don't have to drill any holes? That rack of small brass and aluminum parts at the hardware store contains K&S Precision Metals number 8126 brass tubes. They're 3/32 outside diameter and a little more than a 1/16 inch diameter inside where you'll poke and glue your string. It's so skinny you don't even really need a point on it. You can eyeball where it's pointing. Or cut off the pointy end of a nail or something and glue it in if you want. But okay, here we go for those of you who are still with us. Here's a picture of a kind of twinish thread that I started with, but it was too stiff and kinky and it wouldn't hold the dowel straight. So I reverted to good old sewing thread, the thinnest that there is. It weighs nothing and has absolutely no opinion where it has to go. It is the most flexible and cooperative thing that there is. Is it strong enough? Tell you what, grab a piece in your hands and try to break it. The force it takes to break sewing thread is way, way more than whatever your bob is going to weigh. The hinge plates are probably going to have a cap on the bottom of their pinholes. So unscrew the top plate and turn it upside down so we can shoot the thread through the pinhole on its bottom. And the row of pinholes is not centered on the plate, so turn the bottom plate upside down too, so the rows of holes will be both in the same place relative to each other. So, you're going to hang the thread from the top hinge plate and point it to the bottom hinge plate, but you need to have it coming down from the middle of the pinhole. When I was doing this with cubes and dowels, I made a little 1/4 inch piece of drilled dowel in order to center the thread down through the plate. Remember, centering is what we're trying to do here. If you're not equipped to drill dowels, you can make a replacement. You only need 4 things: the blue tape to wedge the slug in place, some regular Scotch tape, the little piece of empty tube that you either did or are going to snip out of a big pen, and a particular nylon spacer from the hardware store. It's a 1/4 inch outside diameter with a 0.14 inch interior hole, which is 9/64 of an inch. Mine's 1 inch long, anything like that is okay. Why would they make a spacer with a 9/64 inch hole? Well, you can get these with the inside threaded, and that's about the size hole you'd use to thread for a number 6 screw. Wrap that empty piece of Bic pen tube in a few layers of Scotch tape so it fits nicely into the spacer. That takes the inside hole down to 5/64, which for all practical purposes is a 1/16. Hold it together with a tiny dot of glue. I would recommend that you thread your thread through this piece before you stick it up into the plate, and have a bit of tape stuck somewhere nearby so you can grab it and secure the loose end of thread after you've fed it down to the proper height. With your thread hanging down centered in the plate at the top and centered in your bob, whatever it is at the bottom, you should now have a pointy thing pointing to a spot that is not the center of the bottom plate's pinholes, and that's why the door was swinging around. Move the plates so that the string lines up and you're in business. You know how to do that. Plug the old holes with pieces of glued-in dowels and drill your new holes. Remember, don't move in, move out. Here's how it looked when I was done, and see, the door doesn't flop around anymore. Now, what'll you do when you have to move the hole both front to back and side to side? Oh, you know how to do this. Slide the hinge plate that's going edgewise in the edgewise direction. For the plate that's going in the facewise direction, put some washers behind the hinge plate to move it in the facewise direction. On this door there weren't actual hinge pins in there, the guy just stuck in little screws. But actual pins are available at your favorite Mega Handy store, and they're very inexpensive. This seems like a lot of steps to go through, but most of it is making your tools. After that, you're flying. Good, good. Postscript. When I was first making my skinny dowel plumb bob, I thought that I would install a screw eye, you know, those tiny little ones on the back of picture frames, in case I had to replace the string or something. There was one point where it did get pretty tangled up. The only place that sold these in small packages was the big craft store whose last name is Lobby, and the website page for those screw eyes didn't have any width measurements, which of course I cared about. So I emailed them and asked them. And holy cannoli, they emailed me back with measurements of every dimension that you can measure and a picture of the micrometer measuring them, so I know that they're not just making it up. Think of what they had to do that. They had to go into a store and get both products. They had to open the packages, rendering them unsaleable. They had to get a micrometer somewhere. They had to take the measurements and take the picture. These people are awesome, and you really should support them. And oh, by the way, everything in the picture you can get there.